Hi, my name's Trina. I am a faculty member with Move to End Violence, a former movement maker, and also the founder of Parenting for Liberation. I'm joined for the beginning of this incredible series on intergenerational movement building with none other than Nadiah, who is the founder and director of Heart for Women and Girls. Hey, Nadiah.
Hey Trina, how are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Nadiah is one of our movement makers with Move to End Violence and is an incredible leader of an organization and also a mother and a partner. And we're here to talk about what does it mean to have an intergenerational movement. And we've talked about this before, Move to End Violence. Move to End Violence really is doing incredible work to center caregivers and their dependents and our families, and thinking about how do we do movement building beyond just the individual movement leader, but also integrate our families and those that we care for. We're really excited to talk about this and do another deep dive because so many folks are home with their little ones. So many folks are home with their family, their extended family. So many folks are really working simultaneously while providing care. And so we really wanted to have a conversation with Nadiah, who's an expert at caregiving, parenting, and also leading an organization. Tell us about your organization, how it started, and how you've always been centering families and care in your movement building work.
So, as mentioned, I'm executive director of Heart, Women and Girls, and we are a national nonprofit that works to promote sexual health literacy and sexual violence prevention in Muslim communities. And, generally the story that we like to talk a lot about is, why Heart was founded. And, outside of the very concrete and explicit response about us identifying an unmet need in reproductive justice and sexual assault prevention movements, about uplifting Muslim voices, subconsciously it was also my journey as a mother of young children. I knew in my gut that it was possible to be a lead parent in the home and also be able to be present in the workplace, but it was really frustrating to not be able to find any clear models in the mainstream. So that's what we did. We just kind of made space for ourselves. My co-founder and I were both mothers of young children, and in this sort of moment of identifying a need in the communities that we live and work in, we also decided to do it on our own terms. And so we basically founded an organization that in which caregiving and sort of being present and having children present in the workplace was not in conflict, in direct conflict of the kind of movement building that we wanted to do.
Nice. I'm so glad that you had the tenacity to create what you didn't see an opportunity for you and your family in the movement space. And the work that you're intentionally doing around supporting Muslim women and girls around reproductive health and reproductive justice seems like it's the right movement space for you to be able to be both caregiver, mother, parent, and also leader. I'm curious, why do you feel like in this particular movement specifically, do we need to have an integration of family? Why can't we just talk only about the woman survivor or just the survivor of violence? Like, why is it important for us to keep families at the center, or as your organization is, keep families at the heart?
Gender-based violence in all its forms, right? Sexual violence, domestic violence, emotional and spiritual violence, all of that we know impacts the family unit. And we know that oftentimes when we end up supporting victims and survivors of violence, we also inevitably have to think about ways to support all of the people that they care for. And it's critical to think about our movements as intergenerational spaces, simply because what we know of violence and oppression is that it is intergenerational, that the trauma of a lot of the oppressions and violence that some of our communities experience, is passed down. The impacts of that trauma is passed down. And so it's really critical to have, children and elders and, all age groups kind of be immersed in the movement, and also be immersed in understanding what it means to support survivors, what it means to be a resource for each other in the communities.
In this moment right now where everybody's being asked to socially distance themselves, right, or to shelter in place, we know that we've heard that there's increasing number of cases of intimate partner violence or domestic violence in the homes. And so as folks are being, asked to go into shelter in place, that we also need to think about how are we supporting folks and how are we focusing not only on the individual, but we're thinking about the whole unit. Of course, folks are like, okay, so how do we do that? Many of us are working from home, are teleworking, are telecommuting, and we're on computers. We have our children, we have our families, we have the folks that we provide care for, we have our other dependents, we have our partners, we have our pets, there's just so much going on. What are your experiences of doing both, right? Like, your organization's been around for 10 years, and for 10 years you've done working from home or working remotely for your entire team. What are you learning, and how can you apply those learnings to this current moment? What can you share with folks who are like, I can't do this?
Yeah, I think, especially given the current, context that we're living in, where, working from home and caregiving and homeschooling all have to happen at once. It's a very interesting opportunity that we've sort of been handed to really lean into the intersectionality that this moment requires, right? And I think what's frustrating for me is watching my peers and, even my partners' work, some of my other partner organizations and colleagues and friends in my community really not able to be supported by their workplaces in a way that acknowledges that this is not normal, that it is not normal for kids to be out of school for this long. It is not normal for kids to be without teachers for this long, and that all of a sudden parents are being expected to do it all.
For folks to be able to do this work of like being integrated and having families and having young people in the space, like, what are some of the white dominant culture habits they have to interrupt and shift from? Because you can't just say, oh, we're going to start having more integration of families without first tilling the soil and uprooting the white dominance in organizational cultures.
I've noticed that when workplaces do shift, even now in this current pandemic, they've shifted remotely, and there's a concept of trust that is happening, right? And so managers are having this conversation with themselves that, like, I need to make sure that my team is actually working. And so I will make sure that we will schedule video conference calls from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. to ensure that they are working, right? And really thinking about disrupting this sort of model of being, and really challenging folks to think about, well, is that providing a false sense of productivity, right? Is that really providing the results that your company or organization is looking for? Or is it just a false sense of, okay, my team people are actually working, and I know this because they're on the phone from 9 to 5, right? And so really building a culture of trust that is grounded in a lot of communication and self-awareness, where people have the opportunity to reflect on some of the habits that may come up for them. So, habits around hypervigilance, right? Habits around perfectionism, and really reflecting on, like, this is what's showing up for me as a leader or as a staff member, and having a back and forth about when these sort of habits go into overdrive, like what triggers them to go into overdrive. I think the work from home anxieties that happen with staff, I also find it kind of interesting to explore whether or not there's a gendered piece to it, right? So oftentimes, folks that I've heard about, when they're working from home and their staff is working from home, and the supervisor's having anxiety over it, and their anxiety is, well, what if they're cooking right now while they're supposed to be working, or what if they're doing the laundry, right? I often wonder if even exploring that and seeing how gendered that is, like, do we wonder that about our male co-workers who are also working from home compared to our female co-workers that are working from home, and also from gendered stereotypes expected to do all of those domestic activities as well as taking care of the kids, right? So really exploring like how people actually even think about working from home. For the majority of Heart's life, people didn't take us seriously. Like it was like, oh, that's cute, a stay-at-home mom who's working on a passion project, or like dismissing me and being like, well, we don't really believe that you're fully committed to this organization, because how could you be? Because you have to be present with your children in this way.
Well, I've seen the positive and powerful impact of having young people actually be a part of those conversations, having them share what their visions of the future would be. And sometimes their visions are much more not cleaner, but clearer and crisper and creative than our own, because they're not as jaded as us in this work. So I also saw that benefit, like let them be a part of the strategic planning.
Particularly in my case, when we're talking about caregiving in the more traditional sense with, children in the workspace, I think that they have really been incredible in providing just moments of joy. Very organic moments of joy that have, allowed me to take a break and to sort of marvel at the way that children learn and the way that children interact with you. And, we all know that in our social justice movements, we could all use some joy, right? And even my coworker, Seher, she just had a baby. She was at all of our staff retreats in this last year. And just, being able to have a baby nearby, giggling and, playing and just like, it just changed the overall mood of the whole group.
For me, as a new mom of a 7-month-old, it's been amazing and special for me to be unapologetic about the multiple hats that I wear and the multiple roles that I play. So now, I don't shy away from asking like, hey, I need to bring my baby with me. Can you please accommodate me by having a space where I can nurse her? Can you please accommodate me by making sure there are, gaps in our program so that I can attend to her in the in-betweens, right? So that means like integrating spaciousness into programming when and as needed, which should already be part of our movement spaces, but it almost makes it a standard and a norm when you're a caretaker.
When you have children in the workspace, you don't have a choice. You have to take that break because they've got to be fed and they've got to be, they've got to be changed and go to the bathroom. And so in the process, you build in your own food breaks and your own bathroom breaks so that you're able to sort of create those natural breaks in your workday and not have one of those days where you're so immersed that you don't remember to take care of your own needs.
And I think that's why it's so important that we learn in this whole integrating our families into the space, right? Like we're working from home with our families. How do we not give so much and like have nothing to return home to our families? That's what I'm hearing, Nadiah, you share about the shift is less about productivity and the output, and it's also about the humanity of the workers, of the team. Oftentimes we're thinking about in this field, right, of service providing, supporting survivors, like we're often putting the survivors and the folks that we service and support at the center of the work, which they should be. But in doing that, how do we not lose sight of the humanity of the people that we work with? I know we're so focused on who we're doing the work for, but what about the people that we're doing the work with? What are the cultural shifts that the movement needs to make regarding families? Because we talked about like organizations, they can do these things around time and productivity, but like as a movement, are there shifts that we need to make? And maybe it's one and the same, but curious if there's any distinctions.
No, absolutely. Also because when you think about a lot of organizations like mine and a lot of the organizations that are like peers of Hearts, where they are led by directly impacted people of color, I think it is absolutely imperative to think about the need for, healing frameworks and those kinds of frameworks integrated within the organizational culture, because oftentimes our team members in these organizations are bringing with them the collective trauma that they've experienced from other workplaces, from their own lived experience, and that it's important for those needs to be centered and met alongside of the needs that they're trying to meet for the communities that we're serving.
Last summer, I found myself in a position which I had to choose between two roles, one as a mother and one as an employee. Unfortunately, the childcare that I had set up for my kids fell through, and I was distraught and deeply in shame when I called my colleague to inform her that I would not be able to attend the work event that I had been helping to plan for almost a year. The phenomenal organization that I work for, Heart Women and Girls, not only facilitated for my kids to attend the event, but also included them very much part of the team. They held space for me and my family and allowed for me to be present as both a worker and a mother. My colleague told me that I didn't have to choose, and the organization backed me up. When families are honored, respected, and even celebrated, they become a part of the movement. And this is where I believe that courageous, creative, and inspired work can actually occur.
It's really helpful to think about what are some of the questions folks can begin asking themselves. And I know that there will be a tool attached to this video series, particularly for this one, that really gets folks thinking about paid family leave or dependent care or scheduling, remote working. Like, what are the policies that can be as expansive as possible to allow for the full experience of a caregiver to participate on your team, right? Because caregivers are brilliant and have great ideas and can contribute so much, and they just need some support. And I want to shout out Move to End Violence for creating some of those policies, for really thinking about what does a dependent care policy look like? Like, how can we be really thoughtful about supporting folks who provide care and who do that labor? How do we make that labor visible and not something that folks do in the shadow?